They say that heroes live forever, but legends never die. But in the world of franchise filmmaking and television, the rules are a little different. Ask a comic book fan, and they'll tell you, no superhero stays dead for long. Ask any action movie buff, and they'll tell you the biggest stars will always find a way to survive, even when facing impossible odds. And on TV, even shows that claim no character is safe rarely commit to killing off a series regular. But what's the real reason that audiences have started viewing character deaths with rolling eyes or scoffs instead of genuine heartbreak? There was definitely a time when a fan-favorite character meeting their end could make worldwide news, whether in film, TV, or comic books. But these days, heroes rarely ever die, and for the most beloved or profitable, even death can't hold them back. And the real reason is even more depressing than you might think, and the subject of our latest docuseries, The Real Reason Heroes Never Die. The problem. On the surface, it shouldn't be so tough to understand. In life, people die all the time. Usually the bigger the hero, the more glorious and unforgettable their final sacrifice, in real life or fiction. So why is it not the case in modern entertainment? For starters, the amount of movies and TV shows based on existing, fan-favorite, or critically acclaimed books, comics, and known franchises is even bigger than ever. But sometimes, memorable character deaths or horrible trauma is the reason these characters are acclaimed in the first place. But unlike TV shows or movie franchises, authors write their story from start to finish before releasing it to the masses. Which means fans never get a chance to pick a favorite, or threaten to stop reading if the story took a turn they didn't like. Add in things like franchise potential for future spin-offs, lengthy actor contracts that studios don't want to waste, and good old-fashioned laziness, and it isn't even hard to find proof that the more recognizable the hero and the more devoted the fan following, the less death is even a concern. But that doesn't stop famous examples from still trying to fool their audiences. The Walking Dead. Robert Kirkman's comic book series became famous for pulling no punches, showing a zombie apocalypse as nowhere near as ugly or horrible as the ways people within that world would react to it. TV had never seen a story that dark, with the pilot episode showing its hero Rick executing a zombified little girl, and it became an overnight hit for AMC. Make that an overnight moneymaker for AMC. You see, what made the comic such a cruel, unquittable horror show was the fact that no one was safe, and Kirkman's love of especially twisted deaths or unsettling violence scarred the readers as much as the survivors. And almost immediately, the TV showrunners started tailoring their series to keep fans watching, straying from the award-winning print material. In the comics, Shane died in just the 6th issue, showing how bad things had gotten, and how fast. But actor John Bernthal, and his constant macho headbutting with star Andrew Lincoln, was too good to end so soon, meaning Shane lived well into the 2nd season. And no Walking Dead reader will ever forget the crew's run-in with the menacing governor, who cut off Rick's shooting hand and murdered Lori Grimes, along with their newborn baby, Judith. Unless you watched the show. In that case, Rick losing a hand was ruled too expensive, despite Andrew Lincoln begging them to stay true to the comic. And killing a baby, that was even too much for AMC. But the best example came when Glenn, a geeky kid, grew into a hardened survivor, winning over fans for his sense of humor and awkward romance with Maggie. It opened old wounds for comic fans since, spoiler, they knew for years that Glenn would meet his end when the cast finally met Negan and his baseball bat, Lucille. Well, it might not actually be a spoiler, since plenty still believe there's no chance the show will actually kill off fan-favorite star Steven Yeun. Pulling punches is one thing, but the Walking Dead TV show has been pulling teeth out of the source material for a few years. The Dark Knight. Not every faked hero death comes from keeping fans happy. Sometimes it's just too hard for a creator or director to not give his hero a happy ending. In lots of ways, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy was set up to have Bruce Wayne sacrifice himself to save Gotham City, achieving in death what he tried to accomplish in life. And in The Dark Knight Rises, that's exactly what happened. Or so we thought. In hindsight, it doesn't even make sense for Bruce Wayne to say his goodbyes, even revealing his true identity before heading out of town with a nuclear bomb. Thanks to some careful planning, he faked out everyone, showing that he was completely aware his death could save the city, even if he just pretended and ran off to live happily in Europe with Catwoman. Ask a comic book fan, and they'll tell you that isn't really Batman's style, and getting a happy ending at all isn't really true to the character. But did fans mind? Not at all. They watched Bruce spend his life being awesome, and just like Christian Bale and Chris Nolan, wanted to see him retire. Sequels didn't even enter the equation, but when you're wrapping up a story that saw you torture a poor little orphan, why not let him live happily ever after? It undoes the thematic impact of his sacrifice completely. But hey, to each their own, especially since the people of Gotham and John Blake are none the wiser. Game of Thrones. Yes, even one of the most kill-crazy TV shows in history can't help but hit the undo button when it really counts. But to make things even sillier, the death of Jon Snow lacked long-term emotional impact. If you noticed obvious and foreshadowed clues the showrunners couldn't help but include ahead of time. When the audience watched as a dead man was brought back to life by the Lord of Light, a fact soon shared with the Red Priestess, and that revelation went absolutely nowhere, plenty of fans saw it as a clear sign that the next major death on the show would not be what it seemed, especially when a popular fan theory claimed that if anyone was going to survive the show's murders, it was Jon Snow. At long last, Jon met his end at the hands of the Night Watch. We want to say that it was a cruel, trolling move by the showrunners, knowing Jon would be revived in the next season, but they couldn't even resist showing the Red Priestess arrive on the scene before his death. Actor Kit Harington even had to pretend to say his goodbyes to the cast, shedding tears for their adopted brother, every bit in the dark as viewers. But George R.R. Martin actually resurrected even more dead characters in the books, so maybe we're lucky that, so far, Jon is the only character the showrunners have brought back to life. The Man of Steel. Fans always knew that no matter how bad the fight between Batman and Superman would get in Dawn of Justice, the heroes would wind up on the same side, even if it took Wonder Woman to smarten them up. But when Doomsday, the creature who killed Superman in the comics, was revealed to be in the movie, it seemed obvious Zack Snyder wouldn't kill Superman in just his second movie, right? Shockingly, the scene played out with even more tension than in the comics, with Superman finally killing the Abomination by pulling the Beast's own bone spear deeper into Superman's chest, ensuring that the two would both die. And with his death, the Justice League started to form. In the comics, the death of Superman made news around the world, and even though DC always planned to bring Superman back, undercutting the entire event and forever rendering death less meaningful long-term in comic books, they didn't tell people at the time. But as the face of an entire universe of movie franchises, Snyder and Warner Brothers had sequels to think about, not just stunning their audience. So with a bit of levitating dirt over Superman's coffin in the final shot, not to mention a scene earlier in the film where Superman recovers from a nuclear explosion, audiences are told the death just minutes earlier in the film wasn't actually what they might have assumed. It still carries weight, since it's the sacrifice that counts, but it's a clear example of just how little power death can carry when the risk of turning off millions of moviegoers is on a studio's mind. Marvel's Civil War. The Russo brothers admitted from the start that their movie adaptation of Marvel's Civil War would be different from the comic books. Not only would hundreds of people not be killed in order to pit Cap and Iron Man against each other, since a dozen would do, but the comic event that was packed with tons of shocking deaths was stripped of them all. And the reason is obvious. You can't murder a hero without bringing the entire audience down, or scaring young viewers. You can't show Johnny Storm being beaten by a mob, for a few reasons. And most of all, you can't end the movie by killing your cash cow, Captain America, even though that was the final moment that drove home just how important the comic event really was, seeing the mantle eventually pass to Cap's sidekick, Bucky. Where DC went through with killing Superman in a pretty gruesome death scene before revealing he was actually on his way to recovery, don't worry about it, Marvel never even came close. Bucky loses an arm he's already lost, but when you have $2 billion heroes fighting to the death, it's pretty obvious the studio needs both of them to walk away, since the actors are either still under contract, or pre-production on their next movie is already underway. We'd like to say that Captain America stopping the fight was a brilliant ending, and it might still be, but it's really the only one that results in more movies, and a potential team-up when all is forgiven. But one thing is clear, fans hoping to see Captain America's death play out in the MCU shouldn't hold their breath. Not until Chris Evans starts asking for too much money anyway. So what do you think? Do you agree that Hollywood's need to keep bankable actors alive will always win out, even if those characters' deaths are what got the stories adapted in the first place? Or do you think studios are right to give their fans more of the characters and actors that they love and rewrite the story along the way? We won't have to make up our minds anytime soon, since more adaptations are already en route. But let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.